and you're feeling all alone. Only you to hold your own. No one there to help you. Only there to hold you down. So stop. Don't beat up yourself. 'Cause it's everyone else. So don't look down. Look up around. 'Cause you are better. I can see that when the fire gets started, it takes a lot of tears to wash away. When they come and make you feel downhearted, don't hide away. And now it's feeling like the longest day. It's getting harder to find the will to stay. You gotta find the strength inside of you, so don't hide away. I can see that when the fire gets started, it takes a lot of tears to wash away.
Okay, well, hey there, folks. I hope you're doing great wherever you are in the world today. Welcome to another exciting episode of The Battles We All Face, where we help you get from where you are to where you want to be. And this is the show really for everyone. It doesn't matter whether you're a mom, whether you're a dad, teenager, boy, girl, whatever you're going through. This is really a show that is for everyone. And this is something you can sit down as a family together and watch and really get to understand how you're thinking, pretty much. Folks, we're really excited today because today's subject and topic of conversation is going to be all about relationships. And that is something that pretty much makes the world go round in one form or another. And I'm really delighted to once again welcome my co-host, Aina, to help facilitate the conversation and to help pull some really great facts out. And that is, of course, Jojo. Hey, Jo, how are you doing?
Good, John. How are you?
I am doing marvelous. For those of you that don't know, folks, I've just had the last 4 days social media free, in fact, internet free, and it's been fantastic. Sometimes we get so hooked up into our phones and the internet that, I don't know, I think sometimes it can be more detrimental to us than anything else. And when you take that time off and you actually get back grounded, it can be incredible. So for me, it was phenomenal. How's your weekend been, Jo?
It was amazing. You know, I didn't take the day off of social media, which I need to. I'm going to take your advice and I'm going to do that because it can be so distracting. But I took the time and I went and did, roller skating activities with my daughter, had some mommy-daughter time, and it was so refreshing. It was so refreshing. It's amazing how it can really just make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And I think, when we're passionate about what we do, it's very easy to get hooked up into, all of that stuff. But we've got to remember we're here to live a balanced life. And I think more often than not, it's not all about just making money all the time. It's, I don't know. I mean, it's I suppose, experiencing life and life in its fullest, and that means all different areas. But again, like we said off air, it's really important to take that time for you, because if you don't look after yourself, you can't do anything for anyone else. So that's, I'm really glad to hear that you had a phenomenal weekend as well. But today, Jo, we are going to be talking all about relationships. What have you got on your agenda for today's show?
Well, first, we've got a whole lineup, of course, like we always do. Now, will we get to it all? Who knows? I hope so, but you never know. But first, I know one thing that we wanted to do was discuss exactly what is a relationship. And I know you had a lot of input on that. And I'm not sure if we have, I'm going to look up the definition, but the definition I'm not sure really goes with quite the meaning, if that makes sense.
I think so. Yes.
It makes sense in my head.
I have things like that I'm writing down, and I'm just like, yeah, that makes sense in my head. And my wife will look at it and she'll be like, what the heck were you thinking when you were on this?
I know. Sometimes I can't. I go back and I look at notes and I'm like, what was that? Okay, so here's this first. Okay. So the definition of a relationship is the way in which two or more concepts, objects, or people are connected, or the state of being connected. So yeah, okay, it does go, but then we need to dive deeper in that. You know what I mean? Definitely.
I think absolutely. And I would agree partially with that definition. I think my simpler definition would be how, and we'll go for the context of people, but how people relate to one another, and almost, which of the several relationship areas are you in with a different person. And that, I think, is really, really important. That was a great lesson that I had to learn throughout my life, because there are multiple relationship areas and options, shall we say, and it's really important that you know which one you're in with that person, because if you don't, it can end up disastrous.
Yes. So many times people, wind up in abusive or controlling, or just, we could just say negative relationships. And as you say, notice the omens or the signs. And that's a lot of times, people are more hopeful, than, so they ignore all of that because they hope it would be different.
I think it's the first thought regarding that comes to my mind is, you've got to be aware that you cannot change anybody. They change themselves. You call it divine spirit, you call divine intervention, all that kind of stuff, and that is great. The best thing that you can actually do is love someone to a change, but you have to know deep in yourself. This is why we talk about inner engineering all the time. You've got to know deep in yourself what you're willing to accept and what you're willing to allow to go on in your life. And you got to know what you're not allowed to go on, and you do not budge, you do not compromise. That is something, I don't know about you, Joe, but I've seen that talking with people and, psychologists and training and all that kind of stuff. I hear that a lot, that so-and-so is with so-and-so, or they've been with their husband for years. He's an alcoholic, he's a drug addict, he's this, he's that, he's the other. And in my mind, I'm like, and you've stayed with him miserable for the last 15 years. Why? Oh, well, because I think I can get him to change. If you can't get him to change after 15 years, he's not going to change. And I know in my own life that, I went through, a number of things, and then, big spiritual transformation in 2021. That was nothing to do with my wife. She was there, she helped, she facilitated things, but it wasn't her that caused me to change. It was actually, more of a spiritual thing than that. So I think you've got to know as to what you are willing to accept and what you're not, and you do not budge, you do not compromise on that.
Yes. That is big. Do not.
We're starting big today.
Man, set that standard and roll with it. Now, being a person that's been in those types of situations, we'll just be completely honest.
Yeah.
A lot of times people, they're hopeful that they'll change. They say, oh, but I love them.
Yeah.
But if we dive a little bit deeper and we really look at what's going on, they, in some way, shape, or form, feel like they have to. Like perhaps maybe that's the best that they're going to do. They can't do any better, or they can't make it on their own. It's that confidence issue as well. Now, whether or not it's that person that's made them feel that way, or something happened that, childhood, so on and so forth, it is so important to realize that you don't have to be in any situation. Don't put up with it. Set that standard and stick to it. And is it always going to be easy? No, not going to be easy when you have to leave, but you don't want to be miserable your entire life hoping that someone's going to change, because only they can make that choice.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, obviously, I know we're jumping around here in different areas, but let's pursue that line of thinking. An abusive relationship, you tend to find for both parties, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. So it's usually the abuser, and again, just from experience, has got some underlining or very, very evident form of mental health issue that's going on. It could be alcoholism, it could be addiction to, drugs, pornography, sex, you fill in the blank. It could be more of an aggressive personality as a result of something that happened to him or her. Usually the person that is kind of staying in that relationship, it always interests me and saddens me a lot to hear of a man or a woman that stayed in an abusive relationship for many, many years that feels they deserve it. And like you said, Joe, that, sorry, we froze out a little bit, feels that they deserve it, or feels that they can't get out, or feels that this is the best that they can do, or this is the hand that God dealt them, or anything like that. And I think sometimes what it can come down to is, in the nicest possible way, you almost make reasons and excuses to stay with the person because you're trying to find any little bit of hope that's there. And also because the fear of not being with that person in familiar surroundings can be more terrifying than breaking out on your own and starting over. If I can give any comfort and advice to anybody, prevention is often better than the cure. And I know sometimes you can see these things from the beginning when you're dating. Okay, so that's the line of thinking that I'm going on now. You can see a person's personality a lot when they're dating, and you need to say to yourself, should I be really pursuing a relationship with this person? It's easier to get out, when you're only dating or when you're very first together than it is, 16, 17 years down the line when you've been conditioned together. Again, sometimes these things spring up throughout a marriage, throughout a relationship as well, and that's when it becomes more dangerous. And they can spring up from a number of different areas in my own life. They sprung up because I was suffering with PTSD as a result of my work environment. They sprung up from other people because they got involved with substance abuse, alcohol abuse, again, and it's all the same things that go on time and time again. What it comes down to is the person just doesn't know or hasn't learned how to take care of them more often than not, and that's why they're breaking out. But like Joe, like you said, you do not stay there and never ever feel that this is what you deserve or this is the lot that God has given you or anything like that, because it is not fun to stay in that kind of environment for sure.
I call it walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
So to say, if you feel like you have to tiptoe or you have to really mind them words, that's a big red flag. But like John said, they're unsure how to deal with their own issues that they haven't addressed yet. And so really the way that they're acting out on you could possibly be how they feel about themselves, or they're just scared of you leaving. And that's their tactic of leaving you there, is to put fear inside of you, or to make you feel bad, or in any way like that. And so just set them standards, and it's just like I said, it's not always easy. So for instance, go to the Olympics, you're gonna work, and then you're gonna reach it. So it's not easy reaching the final destination, but it's always worth it.
Yeah, just before we move on, Joe, because I think this whatever it is that's just come to me, I think this may help anybody that hopefully will see this that's going through an abusive relationship. We didn't intend to start the show off this way, folks, but it's just sometimes the way that these things come about. Warning signs that I would say for somebody who's trying to keep you in an abusive relationship. Again, you can have the warning signs of as we've talked about, what a person may express when they're going to start abusing. Usually people want to leave, but they don't know how. So these are some of the warning signs that people use against you. Things like guilt, things like blackmail. We call it dark psychology, where basically I can condition you to stay and do what I want by guilt, telling you you'll never make it by yourself. You're just leaving me. You're meant to look after me. You're meant to do this. You're meant to do that. If you hear those words and phrases, that's when you've got to say to yourself, no, I'm not. It's not my responsibility to make you happy. It's not my responsibility to cook and clean for you. It's not my responsibility to be a punching bag every other night. And again, you've got to know in your own self, it is not your responsibility. It is that own person's responsibility. A relationship is a partnership. We succeed together or we fail together. Your relationship is not a case of, well, my wife does all the cooking, cleaning, ironing, editing of my books, and she does everything for me, and I just sit back and do nothing. No, it's a case of you use your gifts and your strengths to work, to build together for the greater good, for something that you're trying to build, for a common goal that you desire together. Sorry, I know that was just really, out there, but I felt it was important just to throw out, just so as folks are aware of, what may be used against them. And equally, you can turn around and say, no, I'm not willing to accept that.
Exactly. If you know in your heart it's not true, but it just hits you hard and it hurts, that ain't right.
Yeah.
That's your sign. And you're right, John. People need to hear that. there's more people probably than not need to hear that. So so important, so important. I love it, I love it. And you're right, this is not where we decided to start.
So for the folks now that have stopped listening because they're thoroughly miserable, we're going to try and bring it back on point, folks. But again, we don't shy away from topics like this.
It never goes on point, but that's what makes it so much fun.
Absolutely. And we don't shy away from topics. But it is important for sure.
Absolutely. So where do you want to move to next? What are you feeling? I got one I kind of want to talk about.
Go for it.
Okay, so in today's world, especially, I don't know how it is there, but here in the US, in the South, which is what we call the Bible Belt, and we're not focusing on religion, but I want to stress that because that's what people focus on. Is it okay to be married, and is it okay not to be married? Especially if, for instance, y'all are living together, or if there's children involved between the two of you.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really, really interesting that you bring that up. And again, with no shame, no remorse or anything by what I say next, we are cultured, or we are conditioned in our cultures, believe it or not, by religion. And we have been because, again, religions have been around for thousands and thousands of years. They will be well into the future. Our cultures were given guidance and were given a command basically to live by, and some people call it the Bible, some people call it the Quran, some people call it, fill in the blank, and I appreciate them all. Again, everything in balance. It's when, the Bible can be used, or scripture can be used against a person to control them, and say, well, you're not married, so you're going to hell, you're a sinner. This is what the Bible says. Then what does that mean for all the people pre-New Testament? What does that mean for all the people pre-New Testament? What does that mean for the people that have never picked up a Bible? And I think sometimes we get so caught up in, bureaucracy and legalism more than anything else, that this is what it says, this is what we have to do. For me, and again, I used to think like that. I was a youth minister for a long time and a minister in America, so I used to think like that for a long time because that's how I was conditioned. Now, at this point in time, I can only speak for me. I do enjoy being married. Equally, I'm very much aware that there are a lot of very happy people that just live together, that spend their lives together and everything that's there. Marriage from a biblical, Christian, whatever you want to call it, perspective, is a holy ordinance. It's a holy account. It was set in motion by God, in relation to the scriptures. And that's why Christians will get married, because they believe that that is the way to marry. The thing that I want to present to you and to everybody else is, why would you expect a non-believer, a non-Christian, and I stress with Christians that the most, because that is the background that I come from, and I know the best. Why would you expect a non-Christian and a non-believer to act like a believer? And I think you've got to remember that is, you may be a Christian, you may love Jesus, you may love the Holy Spirit. You could have someone equally that's kind, loving, caring, of the same nature, and they don't believe in God. They don't believe in anything that you believe in, but maybe they're a humanist, or, that they're focused more on humanities, and they're just focused on loving each other and being kind and caring. I don't know if this answers the question, but as well as going out, so I think it's definitely interesting how it's changed over the years, and I can definitely see merit for both. Is it something that's needed? No. I think the most important thing that's needed is, the right mindset, the willingness to bring up a family in a safe, stable home as much as possible. Because you can have people that are married that, are biblical nut jobs, basically. You can have people that are not married that are nut jobs. You can have people that are very, very stable in their relationships and very unstable in their relationships. I think it comes down more to the person than it actually does about the religion or the traditions maybe behind it. What are your thoughts about it, Joe?
Well, I've been married, no longer am. And in my personal thoughts on it is I will no longer ever get married. I don't feel like I have to have that, like you said. But also I feel like things could sometimes, if you don't have the right communication with a person and y'all are not like-minded, it can switch whenever that happens. Now, does it always? Absolutely not. But that's where that communication and openness and the want to be a team rather than something else comes into play. So it's really, if that's what you and your significant other wants, that's fabulous. But, make sure that y'all understand everything that's going to come involved with it. But then the same too, even if you're not married, in a way, you're going to act like you are. So you need to go ahead and have that communication anyways. Now, as far as with children, I'm with you. As long as y'all can raise that child in a stable, loving, encouraging environment, as long as that kid grows up happy and knows that they can do anything and they see what a relationship's supposed to be like, does it really matter if I have your last name?
That's it.
That's now,
go ahead.
Single mother in the Bible Belt, I get those comments thrown at me often, still to this day, about not being married, and so on and so forth. And it used to really hurt. And so, especially, people that kind of have to deal with that, just remember that that's their opinion, that you don't have to listen to it. Just live your life the way that you see best and just tune out the noise. Yeah. That's all I believe.
And I, echoing that absolutely, because nobody should really be telling you what to do with your life and how to live it unless you ask them, because at the end of the day, they're not walking your journey. They don't know you. They may know bits of you. And I was thinking about this yesterday. My wife is probably the person who knows me best. Then it's probably maybe one or two friends. Yeah. And I mean, Joe, the fact that we work together so much, but then it's probably my in-laws, then maybe my mom and dad, and then it's distant people. So it goes out almost like in waves. But the reality is only I know me best and God, and that's it. So for somebody to tell me, well, I think you should be doing this, or I think you should be doing that, it's like, you think I should be doing that based on what? Proof, evidence. There is no blueprint as such for an individual person. So I'm not saying, go ahead and just live a wild, reckless life. But what I'm saying is, if you're taking care of you and your partner is taking care of him or her, to me, those are the more important things. Because, again, going back to a little bit of what we were talking about in the previous segment, I have known, and again, historically speaking, I have known marriages and relationships where one or more parties, one or more members of the relationship were trapped because they were in a marriage. Yeah, a marriage can be great. It can give you many securities. It can also be a trap. And, there is the whole stigma that then comes of someone that's divorced. And, oh my goodness, you were divorced. And especially in churches, folks, got news for you. You ain't good. A lot of you ain't good to the people that have been married and that have been in churches. I've seen friends of mine forced out of churches because one part of the church sided with the man and they didn't side with the woman, even though she was innocent in all of this. And she was excommunicated from a church. So there are a lot of different, feelings and emotions, I think, that, can go into that. But I think the most important thing, and I think people are starting to see this now, is not, well, the Bible says this, or the Quran says this, or this is this. And, and having that, I think it's the more important thing of how do you live your life,
Absolutely. So are you living your life in the divine spirit through God, through whatever you want to call it as? Are you happy is what you have to look at, because the only person that has to live your life is you. Yeah. And you're the only one that gets the honor and the privilege to experience it. And if you choose to let somebody experience it with you, you better make sure that they earned that, is all I've got to say on that one.
Oh yeah.
Honor.
Oh
To
yeah.
add into your
Well,
life.
let's further that on a little bit, Joe, because something I'm interested from your perspective is obviously when you're going and dating, and again, I've known people that have done this, and each story is different and unique, but every time that, you know, you open yourself up and you say, you know, I want to be in a relationship, how does that affect you, obviously having your daughter? What kind of factors play into, you know, your thought process with that?
Fabulous question, because that's very, very huge. Now, do I let anybody near my daughter? Absolutely not. And I recommend that y'all do not either, because, you know, I don't regret saying this either. People, some can be crazy. They can cover it up well at first. And you can fall, because I'm a very gullible person. You can fall for certain things, but nobody can keep up that face forever. And so, you know, I recommend not even mentioning that to your child for a while. If you mention anything, just, you know, I'm going to go out with a friend, or, you know, I might go out on a date, but not go into any more detail. And my daughter's 10. We still don't discuss certain aspects of it. Now, I think as well that, you know, that person needs to, from the very start, realize that you are a mother or a father, and that your main priority, number one, is your children. And they need to be able to be okay with that, because there's going to be sometimes you're not going to answer the phone, or you're not going to go out on a date because one's sick, or so on and so forth. And you don't want them to just get a negative feeling or a negative reaction to it. But also, if y'all choose to become a couple, I'll say, they are not coming to be a father or mother. They're coming to be a positive role model in that child's life. And your child needs to realize that as well. We're not replacing anything, we're adding to it. And again, whoever you choose to add into you and your family's life. Now, I say it's an honor to be close to me, to be close to my daughter, man. And that's the way you got to look at it. Yeah. You got to set those standards and stick to, no matter how cute they are or how charming, you got to set them to go with it.
And I completely agree. And I think, you know, it is really important, like, again, everything that you said there, you know, in terms of, you know, setting those standards, not being willing to drop them, not willing. But I think one of the things actually that I think feeling in some ways most led, and this might be an obvious thing to say, is whoever you are looking as a potential mate or partner or whatever you want to call it, you got to make sure that they like kids. Because if they don't, you know, and sometimes that's a really obvious one, but it's one that a lot of people miss. A couple had come to counseling and things years and years ago when I was doing youth ministry. And that was one of the things that we talked about. And I just said, he didn't like kids. She wanted more kids, had two from a previous relationship. And I just said, why didn't you ever have this conversation? Oh, well, it was just, you know, a natural thing, but everybody likes kids. I don't like newborn babies. And I'm, you know, I'm man enough to say that. It's, you know, I just don't get them. I really don't. But, you know, and I know my wife and other business partners, you know, they've got kids and grandkids, you know, or they'll have friends with kids, and they just love and adore them. And I'm just like, nah, really? You know, give me a puppy or a cat or a dog or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, brilliant. Give me a baby. And I'm like, okay. So you got to make sure that people love your, you know, kids and being around kids. Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I'm giggling about you saying you don't like newborn babies, but I'm with you. Okay. So for instance, I love and adore my daughter. I mean, oh my gosh, she is my everything. I don't like other people's kids because I cannot get onto them if they are acting up or not acting the way that I feel like they need to be acting. It's not my place to correct. Yeah. And so that perturbs me because I'm like, so I'm, you know, I don't like other people's kids. Babies, little newborns, yes, because they really can't act up too much unless they're hungry or need a diaper change. But once it gets to the really talking and getting into stuff. It's and so everybody has their own feelings, and you're exactly right. And it's so obvious. I didn't even think to mention
Yeah,
it.
but that's the thing about it is, I've had people that I've stayed with when I was in the United States, and they said, we've got young kids. Are you okay with kids? I'm like, I'm a youth worker, youth minister. I'm fine with them. There may be times where I'm like, okay, I'm going to go out for a walk by myself, because kids always want to be around you. That's the exciting thing. They're so full of energy, but at the same point, you've got to make sure you're protecting your kids, because especially when you're going into a relationship with someone, and like you said rightly, Joe, you want to see how your potential partner acts around your kids. Are your kids comfortable? It does change the dynamic, because it's no longer just you, and you've got to be strong enough character wise to then say, I don't know you're necessarily the best influence over my son, daughter, or equally, yeah, I think this is going to work, and again, you've got to have that conversation that this may not work out because of having a child.
Exactly. And I will tell you, children are a great judge of character. So if you bring someone around your child and they don't want, even if they're so little they can't talk, but they don't want them to hold them, it's for a reason. I can guarantee it. I've never seen it be incorrect. So be mindful. If your child is just not really acting like that they like that person, it's not necessarily because they don't want you to be with somebody. It's that they might already sense and can see their character because they're looking at it at a different perspective than you are.
Definitely.
And love can be blind.
Absolutely, because you can get into relationships, and it's very easy as well. I suppose this will lead us nicely on to the next port of call, which is, you can have all the lovey-dovey Bambi eyes, kind of feelings and all the cooey kind of stuff for someone that you're really into, and you can desperately want something to work, and you're almost unwilling not to accept no for an answer. Sometimes you've got to be willing to, and you got to think sometimes more with your head rather. And again, when people say they think with the heart, it's stupid. The heart doesn't think. Just putting that out there. I've heard people say, they think with the brain, and yeah, whole nother topic for another time, folks. I'm not going to spend my afternoon, correcting that one. But you've got to think with your head rather than emotionally. I think that's a better way to put it. And you got to sit there and think, am I being sucked in by this person, believing everything that they say? Because deep down, I really want this to work. And the fear there of, well, if it doesn't work, I'm not going to end up with anybody. And, and again, people do some really crazy things, when they're looking for love.
Yes. And, oh, it was right there.
I had one of those as well. I was about to write it down. It just went out my head.
I know, all the time. It's if you're holding on to something that you just want so bad, you're not leaving room for the actual right person to come in, and you might miss out. Now,
I would actually add to that, Joe, and I learned this with business, that when you're holding on to something so tightly, I would really question, is this right for you? Because, the amount of ideas that we hold to really, really tightly, we guard them with everything we have, like guarding a kitten or a newborn, and we refuse to let them go, even though we may know this is making me miserable. This is really taxing. This is sucking the life out of me. It's making me ill. You've got to be strong enough of character and realize who you are in the divine scheme of things to be able to say, okay, I release it. And when you release it, it may not be fun at the time. You may have to say goodbye to someone that you're really interested in, attracted to, really have a great chemistry with, but you just know deep down that it isn't the right thing for you. And the person could be fantastic, but if you're not in love with them, if you're not loving to them, then you got to say to yourself, is this really something that I want to pursue? And you got to be honest with you enough, because once you release it, that then allows the correct things to come forth. And sometimes these things can just be a little bit of figuring out what you want and what you don't want.
Very true. That's a big one. And I feel like, this is just me, but you should always have somebody there to keep you in check,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a friend, a relative, your child. I mean, it doesn't matter. You need to have at least one person that you say, I give you permission,
Mm-hmm.
or even if you don't, but please, if you ever see something that I don't, tell me.
Yeah.
And then if you give them permission to do so and they do it, don't get mad.
Yes. It's so true.
Accept it and talk to them about it.
Yeah.
Mm, mm,
Absolutely.
John's my person. Not even gonna lie. John's my person. Calls me
Yeah.
out all the time.
And it's important. And the thing is, often the times is we know inside ourselves when something isn't right, when something's going on, we know. And you can cloud yourself, you can delude yourself, you can, pretend, oh no, that's just a little bit of qualms, a little bit of feeling, a little bit of this, that, and the other. I find it funny when people say they have cold feet on their wedding day. I'm like, if you've got cold feet on your wedding day and you're having doubts, then at some point you got to say to yourself, what are you having doubts about? And people try to ignore them. And it's like, you don't just get doubts on your wedding day. You've had doubts leading up to this thing. Notice the omens, notice the signs. Is this something that is a big thing? I mean, if it's like, he leaves the toilet seat up and she leaves, wet towels on the floor, you can probably get around that. You can train each other, and you can train, yourselves not to do that. If it's something more serious, like he's a gambler, she's an alcoholic, I don't know, I keep picking the extremes. These actually are the most frequent things actually that people will deal with. Then you got to sit there and say, okay, you got to have enough strength of character to say, no, I'm not willing to accept this. And I'm moving away. And you may have a few rocky years. I'm not going to lie, folks. I did. Okay. When you're getting your life back together and you got to start over, sometimes you're going to have rocky times. It builds you, it strengthens your character, it teaches you things that you never would have learned otherwise. And when you look back, you may look back and say, I have no idea why this happened. But you can be thankful for the lessons that you learned in it, even though it sucks at the time. If you have that perspective and you make that decision that it sucks. Sometimes you can go through what other people call hell, but you can say, you know what? Look at all I'm learning. Look at how I'm growing. Look at how I'm developing. That's going to be for my good going forward. I spent 5 years of doing that. I didn't look at it at that time and say, wow, this is amazing. I look back now and I say, I learned a lot at that time, that we now teach, we now speak to. Everything that's been designed for your evil can be good or can be used for your good. So there you go.
Always, always, always. And yes, you can always turn it for your good. And it's always for a reason. And it's to grow in some way, shape, or form. Always. And I give you a little tidbit. Whenever I make a big change in my life, for instance, like that, my thing that I do, I go cut my hair drastically, obviously. And it wasn't even this drastic whenever I did it. But that change sometimes on the physical and not just in our mind helps us to make that change in our mind because we see it every day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like a marker that says, on this day, I'm not willing to accept X anymore. This is what I'm, this is the day that I'm changing. And when you understand what change is and how to make a change and how to make it last, then all of a sudden you realize this isn't just sort of a whim or an idea. This is a whole new direction that I'm going in. So absolutely great advice there, Joe.
Last thing is, a lot of times when people get divorced or break up or whatever term we want to use, the other person or even yourself can try to be as mean and hateful and hurtful as you possibly can. For instance, they want to keep everything. Well, even if sometimes it took you 20 years to acquire all that stuff. Now, am I saying just be a pushover and do that? No, but you need to stop and assess and say, is it really worth my energy? And do I want to be connected to it anyways? And sometimes the best thing you can do is just say, okay, with a big smile and show kindness, but that they're not hurting you. And that's when they'll stop. Yeah.
And I think, again, that is so important because people do get so attached to stuff, and a lot of the times people, they see breakups as a failure, either a failure on their part or a failure on the other person's part. I honestly, I don't think, if I can, again, give any form of help and any form of counsel, don't see breakups like that. It's sometimes that you just reach the end in this particular point in your journey with this person. I've been in relationships before that didn't end up in marriage. They ended up in breakups. You know, I think the majority of people that are watching this will have, people that have been married, that they've lost their husband, they've lost their wife, their husband, wife have passed away. They were married for a time and it didn't work out for them. You never, ever know anybody until you are living with them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It doesn't matter whether you're dating, it doesn't matter how close you are. When you two live together and you go through a lockdown, for example, that's when you really come to know a person, because if you can get through that and you are still enjoying each other's company and you're still enjoying being together, then you're good. You're really good. But equally, living together reveals a lot of, habits that you didn't know were there before. Like I said before, leaving wet towels on the floor, leaving the toilet seat up. I should actually, there we go, I froze there slightly. Leaving wet towels on the floor, leaving the toilet seat. I should actually add that neither my wife or I do this. These are examples.
Oh, come on. No.
Well, we actually have a cat that uses the toilet. So yeah, this is an actual true thing. It's called the litter quitter. And we've been training our toilet. We've been training our cat for the for the last, I don't know how many years now. He will only use it with this special toilet seat that's there. So we all the time we leave the toilet seat up for him, and it's a brilliant invention. It keeps litter down and everything like that. It means that smells and everything are also dealt with. But that is, like I said, that isn't something that we do. Now, there are other things that we do that I'm sure, without thinking or because you're busy lives, that get on each other's nerves. I guarantee you. But again, you've got to be, I think for me, when you go into a relationship, you don't want to set your standards so high. And I know we talked a lot about not compromising today, but you don't want to set your standards so high that if the person makes one error, because they're human, because they're growing, I don't call them errors, it's just part of the learning process. Because they do that, because they're growing, they're learning, developing, that you completely flip out and you end the relationship. The issue's then with you and setting your standards so high that nobody can live up to them. And this is something that's often, again, coming full circle, that has often happened in religious circles. They say, well, you got to live by the Bible, everything that's there. You got to live by the Quran, everything that's there. You got to live by the Kabbalah, everything that's there. All the religious books that are there, you got to live by it word by word. The problem is you can't live up to it. How the heck can your partner be expected to live up to it? So I think when you become very relaxed about the rules and you're more aware of, or you're more enforcing intentions rather than anything else, that I think is what's going to really help your relationship. Stop, put out all the rules and say, well, if you do this, if you watch that, if you smoke this, if you drink this, I'm going to flip out and I'm going to do this. That's a big issue with you. And if you're doing that, might hurt folks, but you need to take a look at you, and you actually need to realize, stop trying to control the other person and actually work more on you, because the more you work on you, the less you'll be bothered about trying to change the other person. So yeah, there's a little tidbit.
Yeah, so my last little feedback on that one, because then you put things in my mind. But a lot of times when people, and I've been guilty of it, see one thing wrong, I've been guilty on both sides of it, ignoring and then seeing one thing and cutting it off. It's they're afraid that of getting that close connection, and that's an excuse to just let them go. Or they're just seeking pure perfection, and nobody's perfect. So like John said, you need to really look within. Communication is key, and letting your intentions be known up front is so important. So important. I mean, if somebody, for instance, prefers an open relationship and you don't, that needs to be known up front,
I mean, these things should be talked about right at the beginning, because and the thing is, if you can't talk about it, then that person is probably not right for you.
Exactly. It's again walking on them eggshells.
Yeah.
And if your person opens up to you and you have a negative reaction just from them trying to communicate, that's going to make them not want to open back up. You removed that safe space, and sometimes that can't ever be earned back. So always be mindful of your reaction. Try to see things, but just be grateful that they're being open enough to discuss it with you, because so often they're not.
Definitely. And I love that. And communication is sometimes one of those things, that it does take a long time to build. But again, it's like trust. It's like a tripwire. It can take ages to set up. It can take only a flick to break. So again, try and be very, very mindful when you are listening to your partner's response, listening to what your partner's trying to share. And again, if you've got things that you don't like, don't flip out about it. It's like, okay, remember, this is a partnership. Because when you flip out, what it actually says to your partner is, I don't want to deal with this. You're by yourself. And when you say that, your partner becomes very vulnerable. They feel very scared because the person they should be able to trust more than anyone has basically just turned their back on them. And that really, really can damage a relationship more than anything else. So one of the things that we always talk about at Mind, Body and Soul when we're doing mentoring and stuff is always about communication. If you can't communicate with your partner, that is one of the first, warning signs, omens, nails in the coffin that really needs to be addressed, and very early on as well.
Yes. Oh, such good information. Y'all, use it, listen to it.
I have one actually. This was a question that's just been DM'd into me, and it's how to go into a relationship after a divorce. Interesting one. This person apparently has been out of relationship now for 4 years and is just interested in going into a relationship and looking at dating. If it's all right, I'll go first, and then Joe, I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. Going into a relationship, as we've said, is all about how you relate to one another. There are a lot of really good platforms now in which to meet other people. Use caution. My wife and we met online through a thing called eHarmony. I don't know if you guys have got that in the States. You guys, you have got that in the States. And that worked for us. But again, you got to be very clear as to what you're looking for, who it is that you want to be with, and what it is that you're willing to accept and what it isn't. And ultimately, one of the things actually that is fun to play around with, idea-wise, is have a friend. If you haven't been on a date in a while, it can be really intimidating. But have a friend do a mock date with you. So tell them, it's like, look, I'm looking to get back into the dating scene again. Would you mind, doing a mock date? And depending how close this friend is, they'll either say no or they'll say yes. And again, have them, go through the whole motion. Hey, I saw your picture on eHarmony, thought you were really attractive, really loved your profile, would love to get to know you more. Begin the art of conversation. Because again, and this is a common thing, if you have been out of a relationship for a while in terms of an intimate relationship, you're probably going to be a little bit closed off as well as to what you're going to communicate, what you want to talk about, and then arrange to go out on a date, and get to know that person as if you've never met them before. Talk about family, talk about friends, talk about dreams and aspirations. If you've got family members that are going through this as well, do the same thing. Do your family member a favor and take them out on a date. And then you might go for a walk, you might go for a meal, you might go to the cinema, and whatever. But that can be a really, really good way to build confidence in getting back out there. And, and especially, like you say, if you've gone through a divorce and it has been particularly painful, you've got to, I've frozen again. There we go, I'm back. But you've got to be able to, work on yourself more than anything else, because you don't want to take those emotions, those feelings, those hurts and pains into a new relationship, because that's what you're going to project onto someone else. So make sure wherever possible, as much as you can, that you've dealt with your own stuff before moving forward. Joe, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, I have so many. this one is a little close. But for one, as far as the internet dating, I have known so many people to where it has been so beneficial. But just like John said, be careful. Because there is different things out there, and especially with technology today, there's so many different things. And I have experienced personally, someone getting hurt as a result of it. So just be careful. And if you get that negative vibe, have someone go with you, double date, whatever. But trust your intuition, but always, just stay cautious. But that has been a way to open up reach to meet new people that you might not have met definitely before. Now, whenever you're seeking a relationship after a divorce, I can speak on this one obviously because I'm divorced, but even more so before that, when my daughter's father passed away. That's the one that I resonate with even more. And so I will say, you take the time to get over and past whatever happened. Everybody gets over certain things at a different rate. So, what works for you is not going to work for another person, but you have to forgive yourself that it did not work out. That's a big one. But you have to be happy wholeheartedly being by yourself, and prefer it that way, is the way I always say it, before you start seeking somebody. And a lot of times when you stop seeking, that's when the right person will come around. But two, I've seen and I've done, after a dramatic situation, we go make a major life change, like getting married or something like that. That's not the time that I suggest to make that big decision. Heal from whatever happened, and if that person truly loves you, then they'll wait. I mean, you're already together anyway, so it shouldn't make a difference. But be careful. And like you said, John, which is so big, don't take whatever happened and push it into this relationship onto that person. Because that, it's never going to work if you do that, ever. You have to let go of what happened and realize that that's not that person, but you learned from that lesson, so you don't forget about it, but you don't mirror it onto them and expect it to happen from them. Definitely.
I think that's so important, because otherwise you will end up with the exact same results as you did before. And I think it is very, very interesting, because it's completely different when a relationship ends by choice by one partner or the other, or when a relationship ends because of the death of one person. You are going to respond to things very, very differently than one way or the other. The best thing that I could actually suggest for anybody right now, as we're wrapping up the show, is make sure as much as possible that you have as many fail-safes in place as possible. So, for example, make sure there's money in an account that your significant other, if it's you that passes away or if it's them that passes away, make sure you've got money basically where you can access it. Because what tends to happen is, certainly here in the UK, accounts are frozen. And you need to go forward and provide death certificates. You need to prove that you are this person's significant other, all of that kind of stuff. So you want to make sure that you have money there, and that you can access all these. And of course, with banks, as we know, it takes them a little bit of time, folks, to get everything rocking and rolling. You also want to make sure that you have got a plan in place. And I know this because I've been walking it through with my parents, and the plan, is very, very simple. Who are you going to call? It sounds like Ghostbusters. Who are you going to call? But that you're going to call, the Just Now Dancing, because that song's stuck in your head. I guarantee it's probably, you're welcome. It's probably stuck in your head as well, folks. But, you need to have a plan of, who you're going to, work with regards to funeral, who you're going to work with regards to, all of the things. Make sure that the insurance and everything is in joint names as much as possible, because again, you need this to be as simple as possible, because as my dad said, he's gone through it with his own father, my grandfather. You're not thinking clearly. You're thinking about the love of your life being gone. So you want to have as many things taken care of as possible. And there are so many organizations out there now that do this and that help you with this, which is phenomenal. And we're very, very thankful for that. But yeah, absolutely. Make sure you got a will, make sure you got money in an accessible account, and make sure as well, here's two final things I think that I just want to say on this. Make sure that as much as possible, you are not alone, okay? Particularly after the funeral, because what tends to happen is people will be around you, and again, we're going by the, assumption that it's you that's lost, someone that you love. People will be around you all the time leading up to the funeral. When that funeral's over, the person's been buried or cremated or whatever it is that you're having done, people will then tend to give you your space, which is the very time that you need those people. So make sure you reach out and you say to people, look, please, will you be around me? Is it okay to come to dinner? Can we have a meetup? Can we do this? Can we do that? Till you get adjusted, because remember, it's a transition. Everything in life that comes with transition comes threefold. First of all, it's the idea or new situation. Second of all, it's the no man's land, which is where you get scared and you're like, I want things to go back to the way they were. Third of all, it is the transition taking place where you acknowledge this is the new reality, and from here we shall proceed, basically. So making sure that you have those things in place will save you a lot of aggravation in the long term, and hopefully will help you, so you don't go under, basically, I think, more than anything else. Joe, have you got any thoughts on that?
I've got a ton. Like, this is an episode in itself, you know me. Now, for one, as you said, to make sure you have everything lined up and accounted for, absolutely. Obviously I used to be in the life insurance business, and that's where I always say you need to have something, because you're going to be taking on more bills. I'm not going to give y'all a lecture, but you're going to have more bills. You're going to have funeral costs, college tuitions. This can all be taken care of and compensated for if you take those right steps, if that happens. All I'm going to say about that. Now, as far as a will, absolutely, because things happen, things come up depending on your situation. If there's relatives, ex-wives, stepchildren, children, depending on the ages. Two, if you are a single parent and you've lost the other parent, you better have a will set up. That is the very first thing that I went and did, because who's going to get your child if something happens to you? I don't know about y'all, but I didn't want my daughter going into the foster care system even for a short time. Yeah. So yes, genius. Have that set up. Now, as far as having people around you, it's very important. It's very important. But you have to allow people around you, because a lot of times you become closed off. Yeah. You don't want to see anybody. And that is a big issue. And, you have to, especially if you have kids, because that's what I resonate with, you're not able to be there necessarily for them 100%. And they still need everything they needed before. Love, affection, and if it takes bringing in a sister or a brother, whomever, to come help with that for a period of time, that's okay. That's completely okay to have to do that. Completely. Now, there was so much more I wanted to touch on, but it's like, that's such a big one. Now, how do you approach it with your kids? How do you do this? How do you do that? What was the reason that they passed? I mean, there's so many different things to touch on, but nevertheless, just make sure that you're there for yourself, that you're there for your children, and that if you ever feel like, you could have done something different to whether it's a doctor's visit or whatever, forgive yourself before you do anything else, because, obviously we cannot control that. That's out of our control, no matter what it is. And how we react to it is huge, because people can make very bad choices as a result of it. And that doesn't just affect them, it affects everybody around them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, all information is on point. And if you are going through this, folks, first of all, you can reach out to us, of course, at thebattlesweallface.com. We can certainly, not necessarily counsel you or anything like that. We can certainly provide a listening ear, but we can point you in the right direction through various contacts that we've got here in the UK and obviously in the United States as well, and further afield, wherever you are in the world. But these things are so important, and I was honestly thinking there, making sure you've got your finances taken care of, make sure you've got money still coming in. I know a lot of people actually that would rather, rather than having money just coming in automatically and all that set up, they'd rather be going to work, because again, it gives you 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day, where you're not in the house, where you're not sitting silently. So make sure you have an activity, or you structure your day in one form or another, because it is going to be an adjustment. There's no doubt about that, for sure.
My grandmother always said, if you feel sad, feel depressed, you stay busy. So when she was going through a period of time, she made her next outfit the night before, like would sew it and everything, just to keep her mind busy. And that's in my mind, is an idle mind is the devil's workshop. No matter what you believe, but it's yourself that's torturing yourself and allowing to just dive deeper into stuff that is not healthy sometimes, and it can bring about thoughts that can really be detrimental at times.
Absolutely. And again, if you don't like that quote, folks, then you can go from the Buddha, which is, there is nothing more dangerous than an unguarded thought, which is so true. So, and it's basically the same thing, deal with your own inner engineering, and your own, awareness of things, and ideally do it before, you get to these times. But, and not to diminish anything, but, life and death, again, it's another transition. It's not to, make, it's like, oh, John's just, playing down everything. It's like, no, it's just seeing things differently, just recognizing it's a transition, that there, in my opinion, there isn't death, there is just a changing of worlds. And it just can be really difficult for the people left behind. That's what we're talking about here. Like I say, you don't want to get to a point, I know my grandmother-in-law, she promised herself every single day when her husband died that she was going to cook herself a hot meal at least once a day. And she does. I mean, we're going to be celebrating her 94th birthday in like 4 or 5 days or something like that, actually, which is really exciting. But yeah, and she still is going. She's still mentally there with it, because she is and has taken care of herself for so many years. So it really does play a major role, being able to take care of yourself, being able to still structure your days. Life does not end for you just because someone that you were close to has passed away. Life continues to go on, and it may sound harsh, but it is the reality. And sometimes it's that case of, okay, it sucks at the moment, but I've got to be aware of this. They're never truly gone. It's a transition, but also I've still got my life to live, and there's still purpose for me to be here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here anymore. I don't know if that helps, but if it does, then all the better.
Yes, and as soon as you realize that yourself, and I always result back to kids, but you're able to be there for them, because you got to be there for them emotionally as well, because they have to figure all this out also. Yeah. And there is you will get different opinions left and right, no matter if you have children or not. Anytime you lose a significant other like that, you're being told how you should feel, think, operate, and it gets overwhelming and confusing, and you just eventually shut down in every way. And that, obviously, we all know is not good. No.
I mean, well, actually, for a book that I've been working on, that is something that I have actually deliberately put in there, because people tend to have the standard answer, which was, oh, she was such a nice person. Oh, how are you doing? And they do. I mean, they just ask you that over and over and over again, to the point that you're like, man, how many times do I have to hear she was such a lovely person? Part of it, and it's not out of a place of malice that they're saying this, it's out of a place of, we don't know what to say. So we just try and make something, as opposed to, if you need anything, I'm still here. Remember, the person is still the same person. You can still have the same conversation with them. They're not an alien from another planet. It's just a bereavement. It's a changing of worlds. It's a changing of life and situation. And, you can still have that conversation without having to be, again, eggshells, like Joe was saying earlier on. We're going to work on eggshells because, John's lost someone that he loves, and Joe's lost someone that she loves. It's like, but I'm still the same person. You know what I mean? And it's okay to have those conversations of, she was a great person. but man, she used to do this that drove me insane, or God, Bennett, one thing I don't miss, is this. And again, I think oftentimes because people have been conditioned, that when someone passes away, it all has to be doom and gloom and it's miserable and everything that's there. Sometimes you can be genuinely thankful for this changing worlds and changing seasons. Man, they were so grumpy, you love the person. I was going to say to death. That's probably the wrong choice of words, but you love the person. But at the same point, it's like, oh boy, here we go. But at the same point, it's you doing life with these people and it changes, it happens, and it's okay. It really is okay. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's nothing to be worried about. It's all okay and it's all good.
It helps with that healing.
Yeah.
It really does. Now, too, I want to piggyback off that just a smidge. Not everybody is depending on the circumstances always, is going to have something positive to say to you in reference to you because they're hurting about that person being gone as well. So you have to just know what you know in your heart, in your mind, or because your heart doesn't know, but I could tell John was thinking it right then. But
I'm going to throw so many people off because there's so many people now that won't say certain phrases when I'm on calls and things now.
Exactly. And I do know, I'm like, oh, but anyways, change it. But yeah, so, it's okay then too. You have to understand that they're hurting and they're reacting out of their hurt and their emotions. And sometimes they never change their opinion. And sometimes they come back and they say sorry.
Yeah.
But that is where coming in, forgiving, knowing that they're not gone because they're truly not. Whether if you want to say, it's a different world or if they're in your heart, you still have those memories. They're there, pictures, so on and so forth. And I do want to add, this is huge to me. Last thing, and I'll hush. But if you have children and they're whoever passed away, whether it's their father, grandfather, whatever, don't ever speak ill about them to them. Because they loved that person for one, but that will make them think ill of you for speaking ill of them for one. But you want to do nothing but bring joy to that memory for them because that helps their healing and their growing. And if they're not here any longer, why should we want to make them feel negative about them? It really does no good.
Yeah.
So that's my last tidbit. I'll zip it.
No, I think that's a phenomenal tidbit because, the person that often, people will describe is based on your kind of experience with them. You could meet 50 different people, and we've done this before, 50 people in a room. Every single one of them will have a different perspective on you. Perspective is like the Rubik's Cube. You only see from one side and someone else sees from the other side. Your judgment doesn't make you, it reveals you. If you simply sit there and say, well, this person was absolutely terrible, but I've had a really great experience with them, then like Joe said, I'm going to sit there and think, was that the truth? Was that the full story? What did you do in this to, experience that? I think as well, piggyback, and we haven't done much of that actually in terms of that phrase in this show, but I think, what Joe had said, I think what you said perfectly, how you broach the subject with your child, only you will know. You can have friends around you, you can have family around you, they will all give you opinions. It's like, I don't know what, it's like fluff. Everybody's got fluff, but how you use it is going to make a difference. That's a terrible example, I know, I'm allowed one. But the reality is only you will know how your child is going to react one way or another. You usually get a good gauge as a parent or as a mentor, as a grandparent, whatever, depending on your closeness to that child, only you know. And sometimes you may tell them, other times you may not. I've been on both sides of it where, I didn't know that one of my family members was very sick for a very long time because my mum wanted to protect me. And I was like 17, 18 years old. At the same point, I've had, phone calls from family members that said, so sorry about your granddad. I was away on a little island cycling around with our youth group, and so sorry to hear about your granddad. I was like, what happened? And I called my mom, and he died that day, and basically what had happened, he bashed his head, split his head, was rushed up to the hospital, completely concussed and everything, ended up taking medication out of his arm. He died, shortly after. It's a very, very bizarre thing. And, you don't know how people are going to react until you tell them. But what I would suggest is make sure as much as you possibly can that the person that they are closest with is the one, if you're going to tell them, is the one to tell them. Because like I say, I would hope that my mom would have told me a lot of these things. She didn't get to me in time. I heard from cousins over in Ireland. That sucked even more than had I heard from my mom. Because my mom, again, knows me, and, she can break things gently in a way that a lot of other people can't. My dad's very direct. He'd be like, guess what? So-and-so's dead. And that's the conversation. My mom's more like, well, you better brace yourself, so something's coming. Are you sitting down? Yes. That's, and then got some bad news for you. So-and-so's really ill, or so-and-so's passed away. And that's just a different way of doing it. But only you will know, how your child is going to react. And also you'll know then, hopefully, how best to support your child as well.
Yes. And, that's when your child can heal, is when you determine yourself how to approach it with them. So for instance, Maddie's father passed away in a he committed suicide. And so it was, do you share that with them or do you not? And so I heard, okay, well, that'll make her want to do it. That'll make her not want to do it. That'll give her closure. You can see where I'm going.
Yeah.
And this went on for years. So all I told her was he had an accident. That's all I said. But how? Then that would bring so many questions, and then she could tell, because children can tell when we're not being honest, that I'm hesitant and I'm not being 100% open. So then that leads to crying, if not every day, multiple times a week. Missing that connection, even though she didn't ever have, know her father fully. But once I made the determination as her mother, not seeking other people's advice, to sit down and just tell her, he made a bad decision. He loved you very, very much, but he made a bad decision. But did I need to go into detail what that bad decision was? No, I did not. That's unnecessary. So you got to determine what's necessary, what's not. But now that she's healed, we don't have those moments of crying and at school and at home and so on and so forth. And then that allows her to move on. So you have to make the determination as the parent or grandparent and what's best for each individual person.
Yeah, and I completely agree. There was only one time that I can think of, possibly were others, but there was only one time that we directly had that when I was a youth minister. And I was busy doing a gardening job at the time. I still remember, 10 years on, we got the call, as my minister got the call, and he said, you better come on in, we need to talk. And whenever he said that, you were like, oh boy. Just his nature. But it was because a parent, and it was the mother of the family, had been found that she committed suicide. And it was, well, how do we go about this? I was very young, it's like, how do you deal with that? Do you talk about it with the person? Do you not talk about it with the person? Again, you gauge by what they respond with. If they're talking about it, then it's okay to talk about it. And again, let them dictate the conversation. If they're not talking about it, I would just say to the person, look, you doing okay? Yep, that was it, and moved on. With regards to suicide and mental health, it helps, obviously, being the person I am and doing the stuff that I do. A lot of it simply is down to a mental health battle, or it's down to being in so much physical pain that they can't take it anymore. It's not a case that somebody doesn't love you or somebody doesn't, again, I hear this all the time. How could they do that to me? Because they're suffering, they're suffering massively, and they're not always conscious or, in terms of making, sane, rash decisions. I'll give you a prime example. You can be on a medication that has severe reactions and severe consequences and things being on it. And you ain't thinking clearly. All you know is your emotion is so low that you don't want to live anymore. You don't want to breathe anymore, and you want to end it. And it's not because you don't love that person. It's actually got nothing to do with you, or to do with your children, or to do with anything else. It's to do with the person being so low emotionally, mentally, hormonally, and chemically that their chemical, imbalance has gone off so rapid that literally it's so painful to take one breath, another breath, another breath. In a day, imagine how many breaths that you take, and imagine being in chronic pain every single breath. And then you start to understand why people do what they do. And it isn't a reflection upon you, it's a reflection on they're done. They want to be free. And that's a whole nother topic, I'm sure, for a whole other time. But that is the reality. It is a fracturing of the mind. It is, a mind that is really ill for whatever reason that's going on, and it's difficult. I mean, a lot of people would turn around and say, well, why didn't they talk to me about it? Simple thing is, we don't know how to talk about it. How do you tell someone, you want to take your life? When I, had that conversation with my wife as a result of misdiagnosis from my medication, she didn't know how to deal with that. She didn't know how to, because again, my wife was, very young, very green, shall we say. And this is before I went through all, spiritual transformations and things like that. But she, didn't know how to deal with that. She's like, well, talk to a doctor. You talk to a doctor, they prescribe beta blockers and they prescribe something else, both of which had issues with colitis. So you do get the point. It's like, what's the point in talking to a doctor? What's the point in talking to a counselor? Because they're going to tell me exactly what I already know, possibly even less. And what you actually realized, or what I realized for me, was I needed to do the work. I needed to take care of myself. I was very blessed that I had that divine intervention that stepped in. I don't know why. There's still stuff that I've got to do on this planet. But that is the reality. It's how a lot of this stuff is, folks. It's as simple as that. And I know that because I study this stuff day in and day out. I study the brain day in and day out. And this is, what we know, we see all the time. Why do people do this? Why do people go amok and grab hold of a gun and go and shoot people, in Texas? And they've left notes that said, that their brain was so screwed up that they went ahead. They were conscious that this was happening, but they didn't stop it. In Dan Patterson's book about the brain, that is one of the case studies that's there. So I think that is a really big thing. Don't punish the person that took their own lives, and don't punish yourself. If your child, or if you're a youth minister, or whatever connection you've got, if you have that ability and that privilege to be there and to support somebody through that, great. But be very careful as to what you say, how you broach it. If they don't want to talk, don't force it. If they do want to talk, let them. I know it's a very emotional and difficult topic to talk about. So.
Absolutely. And, like you said, you can try your best if you're aware of the situation. And then if you're not aware of the situation that happens, then you're going to have all these questions. Yeah. But the main thing I feel like is, of course, forgive yourself, but you cannot control another person's actions. The only person that you can control is yourself, and you have to accept that. Whether they did it because they were confused and disoriented or whatever, due to medication, so on and so forth, depression, or they did it because for another spiteful reason or whatever, forgive them and then forgive yourself. Because until you do that, you're not going to live your life the way you're supposed to. And then you're letting their actions still control your everyday life. And that is huge. So yes, it's a big topic. We'll keep it a little more light and fluffy next week. What do you think,
John? The last 2 weeks, obviously, we've covered some really heavy topics. And again, I hope you guys, I can't say enjoy it, but I hope you find whatever it is that you're searching for here. We don't shy away from topics. Obviously, last week talking about finance. We got a lot of positive feedback about that. So thank you very much, folks, for watching. Because both Joe and myself, I think at the end, were a little bit like, that there was so much in there. I think I was certainly, concerned that there was going to be too much. But apparently, with YouTube and Anchor and, all the other great platforms that we're able to put this out on, it's great having that pause button, taking some notes and going back to it. And hopefully you'll do the same today. I know, obviously, we've been talking about a lot today, and it's unscripted. It's unscripted and uncensored. And wherever the conversation goes, that's, I guess, where it's meant to be, where it's meant to be. Joe, do you have anything to say before we wrap up for today's show?
No. Just thank y'all. We hope y'all get something from it. If you want something specific, because I've got like 2 pages of ideas that I want to get out there. So if there's something that y'all have questions about or want to hear our opinions on, or even give your opinion in the comments on it, let us know, because primarily we're here for you guys and just to try and help as best as we can anyways. We hope it's well received. Definitely. So I can't wait till next week. And we won't decide on anything until we see some comments. Then John and I'll go over them. Definitely.
Absolutely. That's a perfect way to end. Folks, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend, because it could be the very thing that they need to hear in their hour of struggle. And if you are struggling, and whether it's with your business, whether it's personal, whether it's, with family, or even spiritually, do get in touch with us at thebattlesweallface.com. We cover a lot of different things there. We've got various groups and one-on-one mentoring available as well. And you can check that all out and so much more. Our new shop section and self-help courses as well at thebattlesweallface.com. And until next time, take care. God bless. Take care. Have a phenomenal week, my friends. And we'll see you same time, same place next week. Take care.